Hey, thanks so much for being here and tuning into another podcast episode of Natural Fertility with Dr. Jane. Today, Dr. Elissa and I are going to talk about methylation. And you might be thinking, methyl what? Methylation. Elissa, tell everybody why you decided to pick this as a topic for conversation.
Yes, so I love the methylation panel, the methylation cycle, and what it means to fertility. I share this with my patients all the time. I'm so excited to look at your methylation. It's going to tell us so much more about your body and about your fertility journey. And I've just been finding recently, well, maybe not just recently, but it's just missed. Like it's something that's missed. It's missed in the conventional system. It's missed by a lot of other natural practitioners like ourselves that we're just not seeing it, or we're seeing small parts of it being tested, and then we're assuming that that's all we need to see. So we're going to take a step back. We're going to look at the bigger picture. We're going to look at the whole cycle, why it matters to fertility, and not why just each individual piece.
Well, tell me about what you just said about why you started thinking about this.
Yes. So recently I had a couple on board with us, and she was so excited to go over her labs because she had methylation ran. She went to her conventional provider. She's like, I saw on our Instagram that you needed to look at methylation. And so they ran methylation for her. And when I took a look at it, it was only one part. It was just homocysteine that was looked at. And I actually pulled up an example for her and showed her all of the other pieces of the puzzle that we look
We're going to
at.
pull those up again. We redacted some labs because if you are watching this on YouTube, then you can see the labs and we'll walk through them, because whether it's the homocysteine or the MTHFR gene, or, oh, I got my B12 tested or my folate and I'm taking my folate, so I'm good. I have this whole big process that you know nothing about covered just by taking folate. And again, I don't blame you, because I remember when I first graduated, and that was 11 years ago, I went into a conference, as we do for our continuing education, and the MTHFR gene was just like exploding. And it was honestly just going over my head, because I'm like, I don't understand what these people are talking about. You're telling me everybody needs folate and they need this volume of folate, so you should just be prescribing it, and it's, you know, cancer treatment and all of this other stuff. So it was just going over my head, and I'm like, I'm not going to bother with this right now because I don't even understand what you're talking about. But, you know, as the science continue to evolve and there's more and more information that's available, you see more and more people that are like, oh, it's the MTHFR gene and you have to stop eating folic acid and you need folate. And it's like, yes, well, folic acid is terrible. You need folate, but you need it in the direct proportions to methylcobalamin or hydroxycobalamin, depending on what the person needs. And then you need to look at the riboflavin, the niacinamide, the serine, the glycine, like the whole cycle that we'll talk about. It's so oversimplified to say, well, I have my folate, I'm taking my B12, my homocysteine is good. So our hope is that after this podcast, you go, oh, methylation is really important. And if you are a practitioner listening to this, then we encourage you to start looking at this, because this is such a missed component in everybody's healthcare, especially if they have any chronic issues. And I consider fertility a chronic disease, especially if you've been struggling for more than a year. And we have couples who have been trying for 2, 4, 5, 8 years. So, you know, if you don't understand what's happening there, you're never going to be able to shift the person in the way that we know is possible for the body to heal.
Absolutely. The MTHFR is something that I've heard a lot too, even before I started working in fertility, and different meanings behind it and what we're calling it out as and what we're kind of blaming it on. So to take a step back and look at the whole cycle, and it gave me such a bigger perspective on it. And now looking at it through the fertility lens, you guys are going to love this. let's get into it.
Why does it matter for fertility? What is it? How does it show up in the fertility space?
Yeah, so when we're looking at methylation, we're looking at things at the cellular level. So a lot of precursors to a lot of other things that are happening within the body. So methylation is controlling things such as egg quality and implantation and your miscarriage risk. It's the gene expression in the ovaries, the endometrium, and then the embryo. So it's a lot. It has a lot to do with those beginning factors, but then also going into pregnancy, which we'll talk on a little bit too, of how methylation is impacting pregnancy outcomes, but also how you're feeling and how you're functioning during your pregnancy.
In the development of the baby. So methylation, and really like I love what you said, it is on the cellular level, so how the cell is functioning, it is a process that happens in every single cell of the body. So it has to do with DNA repair, it's hormone production, it's detoxification, it's energy production. It literally everything has to do with, is that methylation glitchy or not? And if there's a lot of glitches within the methylation, then you're not going to be as smooth in repairing your DNA. And then if you think about fertility, well, what are you trying to do? You're trying to take the best DNA from the sperm and the best DNA from the egg. You're trying to fuse them together. And the download of the information happens on day 2. So methylation it's not just if you're going to get pregnant or not. It is essentially how is the biological instructions that are being delivered to the embryo, or at that point it's a zygote, so it's just 2 cells, not, it's not even a blastocyst. So it's the download of that information that's really, really important.
And not just on the female side, but the male side
Both.
as well, is sending signals for the sperm. And the egg is trying to find the best quality sperm that it can. Once that connection happens, then the egg, and through remethylation, is working really hard to fix anything that's wrong in the sperm's DNA. And so if we have really high quality egg and really high quality sperm, the egg has to work a lot less hard in order to make that happen. So it matters on both sides of fertility as well.
It's huge. I think it's really underestimated, and I actually made a piece of content about this. I think it's a huge lie when you are told that male fertility factor can be bypassed through ICSI. So when they essentially pick the best sperm, inject it into a syringe, and then inject it into the egg, you do not bypass the genetic code that is being passed into the egg. You're literally bypassing the fact that that sperm is too weak to penetrate the egg, or the shell of the egg is too hard, which happens when there is a lot of oxidative stress as well. So again, it takes 2 to tango. And I remember seeing some stories of women struggling with chronic infertility. And it's like, oh, we had to do ICSI because the zona pellucida, the outside of the egg, was too hard. And so even though his sperm was great, it couldn't get through. And it's like, why is nobody asking why that's happening?
Yeah.
Let's just bypass it. And it's like, no, you're not bypassing it. There's a genetic code, there's inflammation, there's so many things. So methylation is this genetic code that's being passed down. And, essentially the DNA repair mechanism is all leaning on methylation. And then when the embryo is developing, there's
and then the DNA that's being passed to that embryo. Yeah. So if you're skipping a step, then what does that say about the genetic coding that your baby's getting?
One of my mentors actually, a long time ago, I think I just heard her speak about this on the podcast, but she said, think about it, when you're having a baby, you're essentially photocopying a book. So then you're photocopying the pages of the book. So then it could be, the genetic code is in there. So if the book has pages that are missing, or it has some scratches, that it's really hard to photocopy and get the proper message in. And that, what I think we don't understand, how much influence we can have to repair the book that we're about to download for the baby. And we're going to talk about that, all of the things that you can do, and we'll open up some of the methylation panels. But if you envision this book that you're photocopying, is the book right now worth copying, or do you need to clean up the environment a little bit? Because it's the genes, they're there, but the environment will trigger, we'll pull the gun.
Yeah, and I just had this aha moment with one of my clients. There was some pushback on lifestyle changes and different factors, and then I explained his methylation to him, and he was like, I get it. And then I watched the video that Dr. Jane made about sperm quality, and now I get it. Like, I'm doing all of this so that I pass on better genetics to my kid. And I'm like, wow, you came up with that all by yourself, and that was so good, and I'm so proud of you. Yes.
So let's talk about the labs, because most people are not testing it. They're only testing components. I'm going to share my screen, and we have a couple of different labs that we can share with you guys, and some of them are, we don't have the genetic component, and then some of them we do. So this is the lab that we are using. It's by Genova. It's the methylation panel. What I will say, the timing of when you get this done within your cycle, in the morning, all of that matters. You can test it at any time of the cycle, but you will see fluctuations within the methylation. If it's day 2 or 3 testing versus ovulation versus second half of the cycle, we tend to test in either the early part of the cycle or ovulation is really great, so we can get an idea of the environment of what's happening right at as the egg is about to ovulate, and the inflammatory process, because if there's a lot of inflammation right as the body's about to ovulate, obviously can pose lots of different issues. And then if we test the day 2 and 3, that's usually when all the hormones are quiet. So that's also another time to test. The second half of the cycle, again, if there's a lot of inflammation, because let's say you have endometriosis, and that's when women will tend to start to get more bloating and their hormones are out of whack and they just feel imbalanced, you're going to see different things. So this is not static. And so what we've done is, we test the blood, but we also now test the hormones. And this is the homocysteine marker right here. If I go, where is the beautiful graph? Let's see if I can make it smaller. This is the methylation cycle and all the nutrients that are involved. And the blue are the genes. So when someone tells us they're testing homocysteine, that's what we're seeing. If someone tells us they test the MTHFR, we're looking at the folate cycle over here, one blue. So, Elissa, talk about all the things that are involved, and I'll share one with the labs.
When we're looking at one, the gene. Is the gene turned on? Is the gene getting the proper nutrients that it needs in order to function within the cycle? And so, like Dr. Jane was saying, pointing out just the 2 factors is a very small blimp on the entire cycle, where each of these things are a precursor to another. And this is how your body is detoxing and how your body is, moving hormones and so many things that are related to fertility, and just supplementing one thing is just a small piece of the story. And so I have other clients that come in and they're like, Dr. Jane said, I've just been supplementing folate because you have it. You're not going to change the fact that you have the gene, but how are the things functioning around it? So looking at the nutrients and the precursors to those. So B2, B3, magnesium, zinc, all of the things that are precursors to
taurine, glycine. And so,
yeah.
Look, this is a male, and he actually has, so as soon as we see this, and if I don't know anything about him, and so Elissa, I believe this is your patient, and we have discussed the case, so clinically we'll go over all the cases together, because there's lots of things that we can uncover, but right away you see that the ratio is imbalanced. And so what does that really mean? Well, when the SAMI is low, this is somebody who's going to feel depressed, potentially impulsive. So like some people will get more impulsive when they're depressed, in that kind of ADHD symptoms, versus more down and sleepy and all of that kind of stuff. So SAMI is a big one. When I see SAMI that's low like this, I think that this is a pretty depressed individual. And I remember one of my guys, he's a big founder, building an incredible company, building another one now, and he's like not having a good time building it. And his SAMI came back really low, and I never thought that, he didn't present to me as depressed, but then we look at the SAMI and I'm like, these are levels of someone who's depressed. And he's like, well, I would say I am depressed. And I'm like, right, that was so helpful for me to know. I was like, oh, you are depressed? I didn't realize you were so depressed, because he's achieved so much, but he also feels this burden of having to do it now and not actually enjoying it. So I really find it's powerful to have a good history. But then when I see these tests, I go, oh, what's going on? His mood is probably quite affected. And so depending on the other factors, for my patient, when we introduced SAMI, now it's not something that I usually introduce right off the bat, because it could be pretty strong. But for him, it was such a game changer. And his wife was like, he's enjoying life again. He's going out walking with the dog. I feel like we're a family, as opposed to he's in a corner working hard and all of that stuff. So we always want to look at the patterns before we go to the picture, because sometimes the homocysteine here will say that it's at 10. And so for us, that's high. We want to see it 7, 6 to 7.5, 8, it's starting to creep up. So 10 isn't good. And then if you look at cholesterol, now we're thinking about cardiovascular risk. So I don't know if you want to speak on that.
This is why we take more than just one test as well.
Totally.
So
yeah, it's a beautiful test, but it's not enough just on its own.
For this client in particular, looking at the methylation tells us a backstory to a lot of the other things that are happening within the system. So liver enzymes were elevated, showing decreased liver detox. LDLs were elevated, showing that cardiovascular risk in the blood work. Looking at the gut, leaky gut, fermenting the food, food's not passing through, motility is low. And then you go back and you look at this client's sperm analysis and low DNA fragmentation, high DNA fragmentation.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Right. So it makes sense.
Yes. And so that's why we look at everything that we're looking at, is because this is a beautiful piece of the puzzle, but we're looking at all of the tests and what they mean together so that we can come up with the protocol for this person. But then when you look at the methylation, I'm like, wow, I don't even have to look at the blood work, and I can tell you what types of things are probably going to come up. And very commonly, like Dr. Jane was talking about, we're seeing with the mood, or we're seeing with the cardiovascular risk, because this is the precursor. This is at the cellular level.
Yeah, and then so methyl group donors versus, so like how many are going into the methylation cycle versus how many are being metabolized and used, and where things are getting stuck. And then the transsulfuration metabolites is essentially the detoxification pathway. So we always look at the numbers, and then we'll look at, because sometimes it looks like it's in the green, for example, the homocysteine looks like it's in the green, but for us it's actually quite high. And methionine, it's in the green. I don't remember, 29 is okay, but we want it a bit higher. A lot of these are proteins. So when we talk about what do we do to correct this and why we don't, like I love what you said, why don't we just test one thing? Because even if you look at the one test, it's going to be super helpful. But a lot of the times we'll see methionine that's really low. We'll see serine and glycine that's really low. We'll see cysteine, glutathione, taurine. Those are all amino acids. So then it's like amino acids are broken down from peptides that are broken down from large proteins. So then you're like, oh, but there's fermentation of proteins in the gut. So is he not eating enough protein, or he's not digesting it? In this case, he's not digesting it, and he's probably not eating enough fiber to help support with the digestion and the absorption, because motility is low. And when motility is low, we're thinking there's not enough fiber, there's not enough movement in the body to help physical movement to help things actually get through. And then that's why the liver enzymes are elevated. And so it's all very much connected. And looking at this, then you're like, what is going on with digestion? Oh, there's lots of stuff going on. Okay. And oh, there is an infection, but he doesn't have a big infection. His partner does. Great. So what do we need to look at the partner and him to make sure, because there is that microbial transference. And we haven't even, talked about the genetics, but just to give people an idea, when you are being told, like, I just think it's a straight up lie when you're told, just test this thing and you're good. There's nothing you can do about it. Just on this test alone, we have like 5 different recommendations. And Elissa, what do I always have say when we're making protocols? It's like, I need you to, as you go through all the tests, and this is what we do, you're just writing down all the recommendations. And it usually ends up being like 30 things. And then our job is to go, but what are the 5 or what are the 3 that will move the needle the most? Because he cannot do all 30, and not all 30 are important. And so that's the art and the skill and the coaching versus punch it into ChatGPT and or whatever, like people are doing that, and then they just listen to it because they don't know what to ask. And then they go, oh, well, I'm doing everything. And it's like, well, you're doing everything that you know of, but there's also the art of understanding multiple moving pieces, how it's all impacting one another. And then what is this person in front of me capable of doing? Physically, emotionally, mentally, financially, all of it.
All of those factors play into each other. So what we're seeing at the data, but then what we're talking about at that a mental emotional component. And then something that people don't realize that we're doing too is like we're looking past when you first started trying to get pregnant. We're looking at your childhood. We're looking at your relationship with your parents, how you were raised, where you were raised, what you could have been exposed to, which are all precursors to what's going to show up on your test results.
For sure. Because your body accumulates, right? It accumulates over time. And let's go into some of the genes. With the genetics, we're measuring the SNPs, meaning is the SNP on 1 versus 2 of the DNA components. And it's not necessarily about like if the gene is on or off, does that gene have a fragmentation and how much of it is fragmented? So 2 pluses is not good, it's more. And 1 plus means there's just 1 strand of the DNA. And there is another one that's not included on here, the COMT. Do you want to talk about why we don't just like jump off the cliff when we see that there's 2 positives?
Yeah, well, it kind of goes back to that saying, the genetics loads the gun, but the lifestyle pulls the trigger. So just because you have it doesn't mean that that's going to be expressed in your body or expressed in a negative way. And so finding this is a really good snapshot to look at those genetics and those factors to be able to supplement and nurture your body in the way that it needs to, aside from fertility as well. But like as the bigger picture, if you can like see there a little closer, all of those other things that we talked about, like B2, the B3, and all of those things that need to be supported in order to...
Yeah, it's like the gene can function just fine when it has the right nutrients in its balance. Yes. There is essentially, you have 1 DNA variation versus 2 DNA variations. And when we have, it's still functioning, it's just going to need to have the nutrients in the place for it to function properly, because when part of the code is missing, it's not as good at reading it, basically. So it's like that book that we were talking about. Let's say there's some words that are erased. You can still make the sentence, you can still understand what's happening, but if now I ask you to read it while you're running, you're not going to be able to read it. You're not going to be able to comprehend it. And so the running component is if the nutrients aren't there, then you're asking the body to work harder to be able to read the code and to be able to understand what's happening. So we never just test the methylation alone. The other test that pairs really well with it, and that's something that I'm pushing the US biotech people to do, is to increase some things on the nutrient panel from like blood standpoint, to look at the riboflavin, because we look a lot of those things in the urine, so how the body's metabolizing it, but not in the blood. And then typically what that does is it just drives the cost up of the test, because it's like you have to add all of these single nutrients. It's at least $100 per thing, and you need 10 nutrients, so it's like that's $1,000. It's a lot on top of the actual cost of the test, and then you need 5 other tests. So that's, I think, where we should see a lot more improvement in the next little bit, where these tests are going to become a little bit more available because the technology is improving and changing. But point being here is, I think that there's still a lot that we don't actually understand about the methylation cycle, because we're still learning about it. But when we see these SNPs, it's if we get the nutrients correct, this person can have a really good DNA repair and really good hormone production, energy production, detoxification. But it's also probably someone, so like I believe he also had the COMT gene at the top. If I see that in women, I'm always thinking breast cancer. Not that men can't have breast cancer, but the way that you metabolize estrogen is going to be compromised here, let alone the adrenaline and the norepinephrine, the epinephrine hormones. So these people tend to be more anxious and more easily overwhelmed because they build up that adrenaline, norepinephrine a lot more in their system, right? And you're laughing because you're like, yes,
it's fitting.
Well, it's fitting, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't know anything about this person, and I do, but I can just be like, is he this? Is he this? And then you're like, yes, yes, yes. No, not really. So, the test will tell us quite a bit.
And another beautiful reason why not to just test one is because when you saw in the cycle, each one impacts the other one first. And if your provider is just supplementing because they think that that's what you need to supplement without actually running the test, It's it's negligent, and we need to give what the body needs rather than just giving a bunch of supplements or giving a multivitamin type supplement and hoping that works.
I'm glad you brought up the multivitamin because I made a couple pieces of content about that. And I remember when I first heard Dr. Leah, my mentor, say, she's like, I'm like, what's a good prenatal you recommend? She's like, I don't use prenatals. I'm like, what? You're a fertility specialist and you don't use prenatals? And she's like, no, because I test and like I just curate what the person needs, and I find the prenatal is too much noise. And they usually have too much copper or too much iron or not enough choline or whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, that's nuts. And it took me probably another 6 months until I felt confident enough working with her, until I felt confident enough to be like, oh yeah, I can't, like, there's nothing in this prenatal that this person needs anymore, because I know all the nutrients. I can see what's happening with the gut. I can see what's happening with the methylation. And we can talk about like the hierarchy of what we need to make sure is working well to optimize that methylation. And we can have, within a 3-month cycle, because that's the red blood cell cycle, that 120 days, so 3 to 4 months, you can have a really good improvement in the methylation. And that obviously lines up with all the information that we have about the sperm quality can improve in that time, the egg quality can improve. So sometimes you need a couple of rinses. It's not just one. And I do find that most people need more than one rinse. And what I mean by that is like 3 months, they'll make really big changes. But if you're a person that's starting, let's say I have a client, she's like 250 pounds and she's lost 20 pounds in a month. And I'm like, or a little bit more, 2 months. So it's like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And in another 2 months, she'll be even lighter and better, but she still has another 100 pounds to lose. That's not going to happen overnight because the body just needs time to repair the deeper components and to rebuild the nutrients, rebuild the proteins and all of that good stuff. But you don't need, the prenatals becomes noise, the multivitamins becomes noise, because this person doesn't need carnitine, do you know what I mean? Or this person doesn't need selenium, but he does need some niacinamide, and he needs riboflavin, and he needs some glutathione or some cysteine, and then you're deciding which one is going to work better based on other results in his gut function, because that's, otherwise you're just giving people 30 things, and it's like, well, that's overwhelming too.
Yeah, and they're typically a bunch of low doses of a lot of things. And so how I explain it to people too is I'm like, we're going to take a bunch of data, we're going to collect a bunch of information about your system, and then we're going to essentially build you your own prenatal through various types of supplements based on what those needs are within your own body. So we're not giving you just one pill that we built, but we're building you a protocol that is essentially your prenatal protocol that's going to hit all of those markers that are most necessary in your body at the levels that your body needs, rather than just giving you a one-size-fits-all of a bunch of small levels that your body could or could not need.
Yes, I love it. Let's talk about the hierarchy in terms of the foundation, then some of the core nutrients, the methylation companions, the drainage, the detox component of it all as well.
So foundations wise, this is the first thing that we do with people. We're looking at the lifestyle and like the 5 components of your body. So what's your protein intake? How is your blood sugar? What is your sleep cycle like? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting restful sleep? Are you having regular bowel movements? And then inflammation levels within the body and how we can reduce that through lifestyle such as diet. Then
I think the protein is like, so here's what I want to say, because people are like, oh, I'm eating enough protein.
Sure.
And it's not, protein consumption is like, we need protein, but you can't just hammer your body with any kind of protein. So the quality of that protein really, really matters. So if you're getting that through food sources like meat sources, where is that meat coming from? Is it grass-fed beef? Is it lamb? How is it grown? How is it treated? How was it packaged? How long did it, all of those details. And I have one of my patients like, I don't want to buy meat from the grocery store because it looks gross. And I'm like, you shouldn't buy meat from the grocery store because it looks gross. But like, so you need to find a farmer, you need to find someone in the area or delivery service, whatever, and do your research, because food source is really important. Now I'll speak to my patients who are like, great, that now I'm going to be a carnivore. And I had lots, because that's huge on the internet right now.
Yeah.
There's so many studies, and Elisa, I remember when you first started, I got you to like watch this gut microbiome module, and essentially, again, by Dr. Leah Hedgeman, she presented it for US Biotech around the gut microbiome, and she just put so much research around the fiber and the prebiotics, not so much probiotics, but prebiotics. The fiber that we need in the bacteria that we need in the gut to be able to digest that protein, to break it down into amino acids, so then it can be used properly by the body. So we talked about all of those things. Those are all amino acids. And so, yes, you need to eat more protein, but what's happening in your digestion is really important. In whether that's leaky gut or whether that's you're not eating enough fiber and you're just slamming your body, or you're just eating poor quality. I can't, the gym world, when we go to Hawaii, I always sign up for like the time that I'm there to the local Globo gym. And I just say I just get fit for the 2 weeks that I'm there, and then I'll go every day. I really like the vibe, and then I'll just go into bodybuilding world. But I'm always astounded by how unhealthy some of those people look, even though they're in the gym lifting weights, and all they're doing is just chugging so much protein, and it's the belly bloat, it's the acne, it's the you could just see how inflamed they are because they just want to get bigger, and it's like you're putting so much crappy protein into your system that your gut is a mess, your liver is a mess, and then you're getting injuries because I'm just lifting too heavy, and it's like, no, bro.
Not to mention
fiber.
the fillers and the additives and
God, protein is so important, but so is the fiber, and so is the environment that you are eating in. So if you're on the go all the time, just blah, 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 and don't have time to prep or sit down or whatever. But life is just busy. I get it. And I've been posting a lot of content about how I'm making food, and they're like, I wish you could come live with me, and I wish I had time to do that. It's like, yeah, you do. You're making a choice not to do it. I don't go out to restaurants with whatever, because it's I just don't want to do it. So I have higher priorities. I want to teach my children how to cook and all. If you have to make the time to fuel yourself, because it's the most important thing that you can do. And I often tell my patients, envision you have this baby already. Are you going to be the parent that pulls out the KD as last minute with some microwaved hot dogs for dinner? And they're like, no, I would never feed my child that. I'm like, great. So why don't you just start now? If you already had your baby, what would you be making for dinner today? Right. So just start doing that. But I'll figure it out once I have the babies. Well, it's a pretty big learning curve. You should start now. It's a painful
makes your life
one.
easier in the long run.
Yes. Well, you get busier when you have a baby, not less busy. And then let's talk about some of the core nutrients in the methylation cycle. But protein is huge, which comes down to digestion and sleep and toxins and all of that.
Core nutrients, we're looking at folate, B12, B6, the riboflavin, like Dr. Jane has mentioned, magnesium, B2, B3, all of those precursors that we saw when we looked at it. And those are the things that we're supplementing. And then in addition
we supplement a lot of the amino acids as well. If it's
Yeah.
taurine, if it's glycine, zinc is a big one. I think zinc, everybody needs to be on a good dose of zinc. Choline, not for everybody. Sometimes you see choline that's elevated, and that's usually because that gene is not working properly, that BHMT gene, or the homocysteine is overwhelmed. So the cycle is just glitchy and it's getting stuck and you're being accumulated. So when we see that kind of beautiful picture, you can see where the cycle is being stuck. And then when you look at the nutrients and the gut function and other infections, all of that, you're like, okay. Or someone is super anxious, taurine is going to be super helpful, and glycine is going to be super helpful to help calm and bring them down. Yeah, and the amino acids, yes, we want to increase protein, but we always usually end up curating some kind of amino acids in there as well, because so many people are just deficient. Or the fermentation of protein, I think that's super helpful to see in the gut. I've had so many patients who are I'm eating protein, and then you can see that they're fermenting it in the gut. And so that's creating a different kind of mess in the gut, the endotoxins and the bloating and the other bacteria that's growing and feeding off that, because essentially things are not moving through properly. So for some people, it's the bile flow and the liver support and the digestive support. I've had bitters before food for some people make the biggest difference in their methylation cycle and everything.
and toxin reduction. So what you're being exposed to, what you're putting in your body, what kind of products are you using?
Yes. Yep. For sure. So it's all connected. And I think that is there anything else that we missed from like the emotional standpoint or nervous system regulation? I feel like it's all connected.
Yeah, chronic stress. So, the feeling, the overwhelm, the anxiety, dysregulation, sleep fits right into the nervous system regulation. All of it, goes
Yoga,
together.
vagus nerve stimulation.
Yeah, go back and listen to the Vagus Nerve podcast.
That's it. Here's my hope is that women just stop chasing the one thing because it's not one thing. And you start treating partners at the same time, because if we look at methylation as the genetic code that's going to be passed down, and that happens on day 2. So it's a study from 2025, and it was in the obstetrics course. I need to pull it up again because I've read it, but then, I made a post about it and then you kind of forget about it. But it just keeps coming back to me because on day 2, the download happens. The download from the egg and the sperm and the embryo. It's not an embryo yet, but the zygote, the baby goes, all right, this is my information, and then off it goes. So obviously the environment really matters, and it will shape if this zygote is then going to form into a blastocyst, then going to form into an embryo and essentially implant. But it's like it's day 2. So when people say it doesn't matter, we can bypass male fertility or we can bypass female fertility with IVF, I still always recommend you need to do at least 3 months, because that 3 to 4 month period, you can optimize a lot. And it can go from, I don't think it's possible, to you could do it naturally, let alone, you need ART at all kinds of ages. And, you're not going to spend, you can either spend thousands of dollars on supplements over a long period of time and not get anywhere, or you can just spend the money on the labs and then be very curated. So you're essentially going to save yourself a lot of time, short term, and I think cost short term as well, long term as well.
Yeah. Rather than taking a bunch of supplements and just creating really expensive urine, you can find out what your body needs and absorb what you're taking in.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Anything else that we didn't talk about? I don't think so. Yeah. We're always going to tell you to test more than less, because we do, and we're just sharing our process because that's what works for us. And I think depending on the couple, so we have over 70% success rate. We do update that every quarter, and really it usually shifts about in the year, not every quarter it shifts, just because the amount of couples that are rolling on, we don't work with a lot of people at the time, and then it does on average take probably 9 to 12 months. We've had couples, when I first started working, it was like 3 months you'd have couples get pregnant because they just had to stop smoking pot or stop drinking, and then you're getting more and more complex cases, and people have been struggling to conceive for longer and longer. And now that means their methylation has been glitchy for longer and longer. Digestion has been, and the body has been compensating, and so on and so forth. But we do what we do because we want to get people results. And I have a patient who, she basically got pregnant right as we were getting all the results back. So nothing I did to help her get pregnant, because obviously we just started testing. But the benefit of having all of that testing when she got pregnant was actually, how do we support this and make sure that it's a viable pregnancy? And she was one of those where her methylation was very glitchy, and we were concerned about her nutrients when she started. So we had to start her on pretty high level nutrients, and we obviously worked up to that. And we had to introduce progesterone in the second half of the cycle, in the second trimester, because first trimester it was okay, but then it didn't keep rising, and I'm like, I'm concerned about the baby's neurological development. And then we retested her methylation so we could see what was happening, because there's such a big push in methylation that happens in the second trimester that most people don't know about. We test because our goal is to have a healthy baby, not so we can dismiss you at week 8. In methylation, the genetics are not going to change. So when the woman becomes pregnant, now we know where is she going to need the most support. And when we know the males, we can kind of see, like, what is the baby going to pick up, and how can we curate this perfect environment for things to be working well, or as well as we can. And that's where the nutrients are going to come in the liver and the sleep and the digestion. But yeah, it's like we test because we want to, it's not just getting you pregnant. It's a lot deeper than that.
Yeah, and methylation's really impactful for, implantation in the first few weeks. And when we see that recurrent loss and miscarriage in the first few weeks of the cycle, looking back at that, methylation's going to tell you a lot about why.
That's a whole other can of worms, but honestly, the recurrent pregnancy loss, if it's before week 6, you always have to look at methylation. And in my opinion, you're always looking at methylation anyways. And when you see, I will never say never, because you see people get pregnant in all kinds of inflammatory chronic states, but is that going to be a good pregnancy? Is that going to be a healthy child? I don't know. Now you're more concerned about things because it's like, well, this is really inflamed, and it's still, I'm just going to support my patients the best that I can because I know things are messy. They're not super straightforward, but having these details of the data helps us manage those things a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you for picking such a invigorating topic.
Yes.
It's hopefully people understand and we can get away from this MTHFR, or I just got my folate, or I just tested my homocysteine, so I'm good. And we can continue this conversation because I know I'm still learning so much about it. Every time I watch a new lecture, I'm like, another piece. And I know Dr. Nicole is nerding out. She was nerding out this weekend on methylation and drawing it out. And it's like, yes, there's so much more to it. And we'll continue to share it as we learn more. Thanks so much for being here, you guys. And we'll see you next week.